Welcome to my video about the book How to Study Chess on Your Own Workbook by Davorin Kuljasevic for chess improvers rated between 1500 and 1800 ELO. I really like this book because the exercises that are in the book are not too difficult and they really help improve club players. If you look to all the books of Davorin Kuljasevic, he has a very systematic approach and he requires from his students a lot of discipline. But compared to other books, the exercises are not too difficult. I think a lot of grandmasters have difficulty gauging how difficult exercises should be, but I think he just hits the sweet spot. So let's dive in. This describes the contents of the book. So there are 3 training modules, training methods: blindfold chess, find the best move, and analysis. So in blindfold chess, we solve the exercise without visual aids. In find the best move, we solve the exercise with visual aids, but not allowed to move the pieces. And in analysis, we solve the exercise while allowed to move the pieces. It starts with the Visualization Bootcamp with in total 25 exercises, and then a chapter on tactics with 40 exercises, 20 exercises where you have to find the hidden tactic in a sequence of moves, and then 20 tactical analysis exercises, 40 exercises on the middle game, and then 40 exercises related to the end game. Just to highlight his systematic approach, so he has been training a lot of players in the range of 1500 to 2000, and he found the typical mistakes of these players to be calculation and tactical mistakes, visualization mistakes, poor tactical awareness, blunders or missing your opponent's resources, positional mistakes, wrong piece trade decisions, poor strategic decisions, and then endgame mistakes, big mistakes in theoretical endgames, poor endgame technique, and wrong pawn or piece trades in the endgame. And this book is centered around addressing those typical mistakes. So let's dive in and go to Visualization Bootcamp. So we had dynamic and static exercises. Here we see examples of the static visualization exercises. And we go to the second row, and the question is, how many light squares are there in the set? So F3, B7, G7, B1, H3, E6. F3 is a white square, B7 is a white square, G7 is a black square, B1 is a white square, H3 is a white square, and E6 is a white square, so in total 5. So we are correct. So this is where it starts, and then how many dark squares are in the set? Where do the file and rank and the diagonal intersect? Then exercises. Please name the connecting squares on the bishop's route. Please name the connecting squares on the knight's route. And then we go to dynamic visualization exercises. So let's do the first exercise. Let me click on this position. So you see the larger board on the right side. Please visualize the position after the following sequence of moves: knight takes e4, knight takes c6, knight takes d2, knight takes b4, knight takes f1. What is the material balance? Of course, we should recognize what the material balance is in the starting position. And we see that black has 1 additional pawn. So the knight captures on e4, wins a pawn, captures the queen and then the rook. So black has two pawns and a queen and a rook. White captures a knight and then thereafter the queen. So the material balance, right? Black has a rook and two pawns versus a knight on the black side because both sides captured the queen. How many white pieces are under attack? So here we have to make sure that there's no retained image of pieces that have moved. And the knight on f1 is attacking the bishop on e3, and the bishop on g7 is attacking the knight on c3 because the knight on d4 is on b4. Can white safely play bishop d2? Well, there's a knight on f1, so bishop d2 to defend the knight on c3 is not possible because of knight f1 takes on d2. So let's see. Black has a rook and two pawns for a knight, so it was important not only to look at the captures but also at the starting position. Two white pieces are under attack, knight c3 and bishop e3. And white cannot play bishop d2 safely because black will capture the bishop with knight takes d2. And you see there's a scoring system attached to this. So very doable. And I think actually they're kind of fun exercises and for a lot of club players good to improve their visualization skills. So let's go to tactics training. So this is an example of find the hidden tactic. Please find a hidden tactic in the following three move sequence. A rook takes d6. So there's a rook on d1, takes the pawn on d6. The bishop goes to f8. White gives a check. King g7 is being played, and after a rook takes d7, the king takes on f6, and black has won a knight, and white has won a pawn on d6 and a bishop on d7. So can you find a better sequence? And we don't know if this is actually for white or for black. If you want to pause the video and find it for yourself, you can do that, but white can have a different move order that yields a piece. So let's start with rook takes d6, bishop f8, and now instead of knight f6 we can play the last move by white first, rook takes d7, and after rook takes d7 we play knight f6, king g7 and knight takes d7. So this is find a hidden tactic. So let's scroll down. We are in the tactics session and we are in these 20 exercises, find it, the hidden tactic in a sequence of moves. Then we get into the tactical analysis exercises. So please analyze and compare the following two moves: bishop e6 and king f7. So what do we see if we do the orientation in the position? The knight on d5 is being pinned. But in the current position, white could unpin themselves by playing knight e7, check, then taking the rook and then taking the bishop and save the knight in that way. So what is the right way to continue? We can play king f7 and then the check on e7 is no longer possible, or we can play bishop e6 and add an attacker on the pinned piece. Pause the video and see if you can find a solution for yourself. Well, of course, after bishop e6 we should think about if we move the knight and attack the bishop, then after that we can take the bishop and with the knight, and then the rook on d4 and the rook on f8 would be under attack. So in this position, if we have bishop e6, white can play knight takes c7, and now we have this double attack of the knight on f8 and on d4, and actually white is just a pawn up. So we have to conclude that in this position the best continuation is king f7 to step out of this check by the bishop. So let's go back to the beginning. So what have we covered so far? The static exercises, where we had to say, name the white squares, or what are the intersecting squares on, and how does those were the static visualization exercises. Then we did the dynamic visualization exercises, where we had to find out which pieces were under attack, what the material balance was, and whether bishop d2 was a safe move. We did find a hidden tactic exercise and a tactical exercise. In the hidden tactic, we played rook takes d7 instead of knight f6 first, and in this tactical analysis we analyzed bishop e6 versus king f7. So let's go now to the middle game and look at find the best move and piece trade decisions, and then move on to the end game, find the best move and endgame analysis exercises. So we are moving on to the middle game. So here we have a position, and the question is, exercise 1, is it better for black to trade on g3 with knight takes g3, or castle kingside and continue with short castle? Well, if I were in this position, of course, my first inclination would be that knight takes g3 would reduce the tension, and this bishop is not going anywhere, so I would be inclined to play castle. Of course, we have to verify and see, for instance, after castle by black, h3, bishop e6, is there a discovered attack of the knight of f3? That's not the case, because we always have knight g3 check. So looking at this position, I would not release the tension, and I would play castle. And then there's a second argument to it in this position, that if you play a knight takes g3 in this position, you actually activate the rook on f1, and the rook on f1 will get more grip on the f-file. So let's see what the solution says. We have a complex middle game on the board. Black decided to play knight takes g3, a dubious move, because he wanted to obtain the bishop pair. However, this is a typical positional mistake in a relatively closed position. He should have kept the tension instead. A simple continuation castle, h3, bishop e6 would have held the balance. White doesn't capture towards the center, but captures with the f-pawn, and this recapture gives white long-term pressure along the f-file. The notion that black wins the bishop pair signifies positional dogmatism. So, just an example of the middle game. So let's go now to the middle game. Find the best move. Piece trade decisions. Our next, let's see if they are the last ones. Yes. And then you can see there is a scoring mechanism. So let me scroll up and see. So we did find the best move in the middle game exercises. Yes. So let's look at one piece trade decision. Is it better for black to trade the light squared bishop with bishop takes e2 or keep it with bishop e6? What do you think? Keep the bishop or trade the bishop? I would keep the bishop, also because of the control over d5, but let's have a look. So bishop takes e2, 1 point, is a positional inaccuracy. Black has a better light squared bishop, so he should preserve it. After this trade, he will have issues defending the light squares around the e5 pawn, right? So, like I said, I would like to keep it and play bishop e6 to keep the squares d5 and f5 well protected. So let's move on to the endgame. Endgame analysis. So this would be the first exercise. And in this case, I just loaded the position. White has a promising pawn mass in the center, and it's time to put it to work. What is a better way to create a passed pawn? First take on g6, h takes g6 and then e5, or e5 at once. Of course, if it's possible to play e5, that's preferable because it threatens e6 with a double attack of the pawn on the rook on d7 and the king on f7. So we have to evaluate what happens after e5 at once, and then the critical test is, of course, g takes f5. So do you see any good continuation, or did we just lost a pawn with no compensation? And actually, after e5 and then g takes f5, white has the very powerful knight f4. And if we would trade on g6 first and h6 g6, and we play e5 then black can prevent knight f4 by playing, for instance, g5. So it looks like e5 at once is the better solution. So we are correct. F takes g6, h takes g6, e5 is worse than the alternative because it allows black to contain the e-pawn. So let's have a look at e5. Right, it forces our move. Now we have our very strong move, knight f4. We threaten the move e6, and that is such a strong threat that it is worth sacrificing the f-pawn for. So that is endgame analysis, and we have find the best move left in the endgame. So let's have a look. If I can find the endgame that I was looking for. We have find the best move, all the examples first. So we go to this position. Exercise 1. Is it better for white to enter the same colored bishop endgame by trading his bishop for a knight with bishop takes d8, or keeping the bishop pair with bishop c4? Of course, if you would be dogmatic, you would say, I'd like to keep the bishop pair because they control so many squares. But we have to think about the specific endgame. And if we look at this endgame, right, we see that at this moment all the black pawns are on white squares. And the black king is kind of tied to the defense of f7, and the bishop is tied to the defense of the pawn a6. So there are kind of two weaknesses. If we play a4 here, a b4 here, then there's no longer a5. And then we can bring our king, and then we either go for the a6 pawn, or if the king helps the bishop in the defense, we can go for f7 and we have a winning pawn ending. So let's have a look at the solution. White should not waste an opportunity to transition into the same colored bishop's endgame by playing bishop takes d8. It would be superficial to cling on to the bishop pair with bishop c4, because black could set up a serious defense with knight e6, king f2, king d6, b4, king d7. Okay, so let's go back to the introduction. So this is the content. I really like that these exercises are doable for club players. You will be out of your comfort zone in a number of exercises, but they come from a lot of games from club players, and they have been tested by the author Kuljasevic on his own students. And I fully recommend this book to everyone. You can see that I'm currently using the New in Chess app, but you can also, of course, buy it as a physical book or on Forward Chess. Thank you for watching, and I hope you subscribe, and I'd like to know if this was useful. So leave a comment, please. Thank you.